The United States Supreme Court will hold its final session today before adjourning for the summer, so a lot of business going on there. A decision is expected. Actually, we've just been telling you in our breaking news that there has been a decision already made in the New Haven police case involving 20 New Haven firefighters. They say they were denied promotions because of their race. Supreme Court nominee Sotomayor, you may remember, was one of the 3 judges who rejected an initial appeal in this case. The court also will actually, I think we just now have our senior legal analyst, Jeffrey Toobin, standing by. Because, Jeff, we want to talk more about this. Obviously, the decision came down 5-4. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the firefighters.
Absolutely. The Supreme Court, 5-4, in a decision by Justice Anthony Kennedy, who was the swing vote in this case, as in so many others, ruled that the New Haven firefighters were the victims of reverse discrimination, that by canceling the test, the
hey, Jeff, do me a favor. Do me a favor. Back up and remind us the story. Okay. Because there may be some people out there who don't know what the test is and don't remember really what happened here.
Absolutely. Good point. Basically, what happened is New Haven wanted to decide which firefighters to promote to higher positions. And they issued a test. They did a written test, which also they had an oral component that said would be the main factor in deciding which firefighters would be promoted. The top finishers in the test were white firefighters and 1 Hispanic. The black firefighters argued that the test was unfair, that it wasn't a good test of whether you'd be a good senior firefighter. And the city of New Haven responded to those complaints by canceling the test and planning a new one that they said would be a more fair test. Well, the white firefighters who did well on the original test, they sued. They said by canceling the test, the city had engaged in reverse discrimination against those white firefighters. The Court of Appeals said that the city was right to cancel the test, and most significantly, one of the judges on the 3-judge panel was Judge Sonia Sotomayor, whom President Obama has nominated to the Supreme Court.
Right, and obviously there was a lot of question about that when we were first hearing her name, and when we then saw the nomination come, that was one of the things that came up. Hey, what's going to happen with this New Haven thing?
That's exactly right. And now we know what's going to happen with the New Haven case. 5 justices, the 5 conservatives on the court, have overruled the decision that Judge Sotomayor endorsed. That was her decision. Certainly there will be critics who say that she was overruled by the Supreme Court, but 4 justices were on her side, including, of course, David Souter, whose last day is today.
Yeah.
And she endorsed the position that Souter endorsed, but the majority ruled the other way. And we also have to see, frankly, we haven't really, the written opinion hasn't been released yet. We just have to see how much the court has cut back on affirmative action remedies by cities.
Yeah, definitely. An awful lot more to talk about. Jeff, if you'll hang out with us, that would be great, because we have Kate Baldwin standing by right now, who I believe has the ruling. Is that right, Kate?
I do. I have it in my hand right now, Heidi. We're actually just, as you can imagine, going through, but we do have some very interesting quotes just as we're going through this very preliminarily. Writing for the majority, Justice Kennedy, Jeffrey Toobin was going through kind of how things fell apart, but fell along ideological lines. But let me read an interesting quote that he writes for the majority. He writes, "On the record before us, there's no genuine dispute that the city lacked a strong basis and evidence to believe it would face disparate impact liability," that disparate impact on a protected class, as we've talked about, going on to say liability if it certified the examination results. And here's where it gets interesting. In other words, there is no evidence, let alone the required strong basis in evidence, that the tests were flawed because they were not job-related or because other equally valid and less discriminatory tests were available to the city. The city, when it argued its case, Heidi, had said that it was there were fear of getting sued by the minority, some of the minority firefighters who did not qualify because of these promotional exams. Well, the court writes right here, it says, "Fear of litigation alone cannot justify an employer's reliance on race to the detriment of individuals who passed the examinations and qualified for the promotions." Very interesting, very clear language coming from the Supreme Court right there. Heidi.
Wow. All right. Well, I have so many questions, but obviously I don't think we're going to know any answers to them yet. You know, what happens next? Would the firefighters then go ahead and be promoted? Is there any word on exactly how this will play out back in New Haven?
That is a very good question. We do know that the firefighters wanted those promotional exams, those results reinstated. They wanted the promotion. Where it goes from here, we know very clearly where the Supreme Court stands, and we will be hearing more about how exactly that actually falls out in the city of New Haven. I can read very quickly, Heidi, if we have a second.
Sure.
Justice Ginsburg, writing for the minority, the dissenting justices here. She writes very carefully. It says, this case presents an unfortunate situation, one New Haven might well have avoided had it utilized a better selection process in the first place. But what this case does not present is race-based discrimination in violation of Title VII. That's the big question that's at issue here. And she says, I dissent from the court's judgment, which rests on the false premise that respondents showed a significant statistical disparity, but nothing more.
Yeah,
very interesting there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Kate Baldwin, great job. Thanks so much for bringing that to us. Appreciate it in real time here, obviously. The breaking news once again that the Supreme Court has ruled in the New Haven firefighters case 5-4, ruling in favor of the firefighters. And Jeffrey Toobin, if I still have you there, obviously as we began talking about before I knew that Kate had the ruling in her hand, Sotomayor, this confirmation process, this will definitely come up. It's another reversal for her.
No question about it. This will be a main focus of the attack against her by conservative senators who will say that her views are out of step with the Supreme Court. Now, that will be a somewhat tough argument to make because her views are clearly in step with 4 justices on the court, including the justice that she will be replacing. So it's not like her position was so far out of the mainstream on this case that she couldn't even get a single justice to agree with her. She got 4 justices to agree with her. But, you know, I think this will be an opportunity for senators who are opposed to Sonia Sotomayor to raise the issue of racial preferences. Should the Constitution, as Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas are famous for advocating, should the Constitution be colorblind? Should employers, should universities no longer be allowed to consider race at all in promotions, in admissions? Or should diversity be something that states and universities should be allowed to promote through their admissions practices? That's a big issue before the court. That's something Sonia Sotomayor is certainly going to be asked about.
Yeah, the Constitution being colorblind, one thing, and then the actual judges, the Supreme Court justices themselves, in their decision-making, how much to allow race to play. And obviously that's another part of the discussion as well. But we could talk all day, as usual. Jeff Toobin, thanks so much. Thanks for sticking around. A lot more going on with the Supreme Court today.